think I'll start with a little story from the Lieds. It's a Taoist classic, 2,000-something years old. So there are two boys having an argument. And the argument is about whether the sun is closer to the earth in the morning or at midday. And they're arguing back and forth. And who should they see walking down the road with his disciples but Confucius himself? So they're like, okay, let's ask this guy. Knowing who he is, they ask him. And they each make their case. And the first boy makes his case that the sun is obviously closer in the morning because the sun looks bigger in the morning. And the second boy says, no, that's ridiculous. The sun is obviously closer at noon because it's hotter at noon. So they ask Confucius, who's right? Confucius was at a loss to tell which boy had the better case. So they jeered at him. Who said you were so smart? So the story, it's kind of presented as a joke at the expense of Confucius. But what it's really about, it's about the way that our frame of reference and our conceptual framework dictates the answers that we come up with. So I've been, attending some of the talks here and noticing, there are a lot of really smart people among the speakers, and lots of answers. And they're all kind of the same, but they're all kind of different too. And in fact, there could even be arguments. What is the self? And what's the nature of the universe? Is the self everything? Is the self nothing? Maybe the self is a point of awareness in a matrix of relationship. Maybe there is no self. Maybe it's just a big I am. Well, maybe that creates a dualism between the I and the amming. So maybe it's just a big thing of amness, and there's all this kind of. I'm not saying that there's no insight or anything, or that there's no value in this kind of exploration. But I am seeing some kind of unstated assumptions operating here. One of them is that the most important thing is to come up with the correct answer. And that once you've done that, then, the essential problem is solved and you know what to do. This is a habit that I learned in school. You come up with the correct answer, and that's what you get your good grade for. That's the problem solved, But just because we come up with the right answer and have an opinion about the nature of self or the nature of reality doesn't necessarily mean that we actually believe the answer that we come up with. Opinion and belief are two very, very different things. A belief is something that it's not just mental, but it's physical, it's cellular. It's something that you act on. I have a belief that this is a solid object here. And a lot of people, probably everybody in this room, has opinions that contradict their beliefs. One of the other speakers talked about that, well, no, I'm not going to quite go there. The other thing, though, and it also kind of taps into our belief in the axiomatic method, that the way to approach understanding is that you come up with a few basic definitions, a few basic principles, a few basic postulates, and then you reason out from those things. So I'm just going to say that, and then there's also the idea, and this is kind of Cartesian philosophy or the Cartesian method, where you go into a dark room and you think really hard and you introspect and you come up with the solution, and then you unveil it in the world. And so I'm going to kind of take a different approach. For one thing, because I'm not really qualified to deliver teachings. I haven't done decades of extraordinary meditation. I haven't had near-death experiences. I'm not channeling ascended masters. Just a guy from Pennsylvania. So I'm not going to deliver teachings. I'm going to tell a few stories and maybe invite you into an experience of a sort. This is kind of a story inside a story. Someone asked me who I admire most, who I draw a lot of inspiration from. And I think she was expecting me to name, I don't know, Gandhi or Einstein or maybe somebody alive today, Vandana Shiva or somebody like that. And when I thought about it, and I described a woman I met in Bhutan on a trip there. She told her story to me. She had, when she was a young woman, she had a 2-year-old daughter. And the daughter, a vibrant, delightful young girl, was with a babysitter and had an accident and fell and hit her head on the concrete. And the babysitter was too afraid to tell the woman, Budo, I believe her name was, what had happened, but there was something wrong, and Budo eventually took her to the hospital. But by that time, it was too late. There had been a hemorrhage, and the 2-year-old daughter, went into a vegetative state, so deep that even if you waved something in front of her face, her eyeballs wouldn't move. Absolutely no response at all. So Budo took her home and took care of her. For 15 years. Every 2 hours, she would turn her over so that she wouldn't get bed sores. And in 15 years, she never got a single bed sore. She would feed her. She still had a swallow reflex, so she would feed her all of her meals. She would put her in a wheelchair and take her outside to get fresh air. She would read stories to her every night at bedtime, even though everybody was telling her that there's no way that she could hear these stories. And in 15 years, the daughter never gave her a single response. And then finally, the daughter passed away. Now, I'll tell you in a few minutes why I admire this woman more than Gandhi and why she inspires me more. But first, I'm going to say, when I heard that story, I thought, I refuse to live in a universe in which what that woman did doesn't really matter. Because from the perspective of, call it instrumental rationality, what she did didn't matter. I mean, she was pouring out all of that kindness, all of that love, doing all of that hard work, day after day after day. But the girl couldn't even understand what she was saying. The girl wasn't benefiting from it at all. It was completely wasted. What was the result? What changed in the world? She could have spent her love and attention and energy on children who actually are, conscious and alive. She could have been campaigning against climate change. She could have been working on social issues or something like that, right? But instead, she was doing something that our understanding of cause and effect that we've inherited tells us didn't have any effect at all. And that conflicted with what I felt, that this woman did something heroic and significant. And this is a rather extreme example, but you can translate that into all of those little invisible things that you do in your life that, from the perspective of climate change or nuclear Armageddon or Fukushima or any of these, the death of the forests around the world, the dying of the oceans, all of these things, from that perspective, make no sense. Those little invisible things. Like, I'm faced with this all the time, should I go out and speak at such and such a conference again, and another one, or maybe I should stay home that month and take care of my baby or give some one-on-one attention to my teenager. And in that moment, when I choose, or it could even be just, do I spend some time with my teenager now, or do I write an essay that thousands of people will read and will have a measurable effect in the world? What do I do? What do I listen to? Do I listen to the calculus of a measurable cause and effect, or do I spend time with that kid and have a connection, and it feels like something significant has happened? You've had those moments. It feels like the most important thing in the world, maybe. Maybe you've been at the bedside of a dying person or something like that, and there's a moment of forgiveness, a moment of release, and it feels like the most important thing in the world. But the understanding of how change happens in the universe that we've inherited in our culture says that those little things don't matter. And so I thought, I want to live in a universe in which my feeling of significance is valid, where the logic of the heart doesn't conflict with the logic of the mind. So, what is this logic of the mind that we've inherited that makes those kinds of actions irrational? And actually, it's pretty much every action that becomes irrational, because even if you are campaigning against climate change or doing something like that, you're just one person. Even if you're recycling and doing all of these ethical things, you're just one person. What difference does it make? Almost anything worth doing today is irrational from an instrumental point of view. I mean, you could say, well, if everybody does it, then it would make a difference, but you're not everybody, you're just you. So this kind of ideology that we learn, and to do things according to their measurable effects that we can predict through our received understanding of causality, is actually very paralyzing. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Okay. It's a little dark out there and bright here, so I just want to make sure that I'm actually speaking to human beings, and it's not being an insane person who just talks to himself. I've been noticing a lot of insane people walking around with these little things, talking to themselves.
It's all okay.
So all weekend we've been hearing about what this received, I'll call it a story, is that invalidates our heart-based choices. I call it the story of separation. You could call it the story of dualism. And it basically says, it gives us answers to fundamental questions like, who are you? Why are you here? What's the nature of this world out there? How do things change? How do things happen? What's important? What's valuable? Where have we come from? Where are we going? In other words, it's a mythology that gives these fundamental answers. And what we've lived in is a mythology that says what you are is a discrete, separate self in a universe of other. You're a mode of consciousness in a robot made of flesh. You're a soul encased in flesh. You're kind of an automaton programmed by your DNA to maximize reproductive self-interest. You're an economic man seeking to maximize financial self-interest. You're kind of this agglomeration of generic particles operating according to deterministic forces and so forth. And this is obviously obsolete science. Everybody in this room knows that it's obsolete science, the science of determinism. But our intuitions are still very infused with this worldview. And it says that the way things change in the universe is through the exercise of force. This is Newtonian mechanics, or even Galilean mechanics. A body that is at rest will stay at rest unless you exercise a force and make it change. And it says that the universe outside of ourselves does not have the properties, the qualities of a self. It does not have intelligence. It does not have consciousness. It does not have awareness, aliveness, sentience, purpose, intentionality. Those are only the qualities of human beings. But the matter outside of ourselves is simply a bunch of generic particles and impersonal forces. That world out there is just a melee of force and mass, or of mathematics, or of information, or something that is dead. This is quite a new, I'm calling it an old story now, but it's actually quite new. Indigenous people did not believe that. They believed that everything, all of matter, all beings, possessed the qualities of a self: interiority, intelligence, purpose, desire. But we see it differently. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit, the title of the talk was about scientific heresies. So I'm going to offer you a hypothesis, which is what makes something a scientific in answer to the question, what makes something a scientific heresy? What makes something heretical? And why is there such a vociferous antipathy toward these kind of paradigm-violating theories and phenomena? Dean Radin just now made a very rational, evidence-based case for the existence of telepathy and a whole bunch of other things. You can't say that there's a problem with the science, but the response of critics who call themselves skeptics has a very obvious emotional component to it. Something is being threatened that isn't just an isolated intellectual construct. What is being threatened here? So I've looked at different kinds of heterodox theories and phenomena that are excluded from our kind of consensus view of reality, and asked, what do they have in common? What do, for example, the theory of water memory and homeopathy and crop circles and morphic fields and psi phenomena, what do they all have in common? What they all have in common is that they suggest that the universe outside of ourselves has the properties of self, and therefore that our kind of special place that we've accorded to ourselves is questionable. So the universe outside of ourselves has properties of intelligence and purpose. So, for example, I'll just name one: homeopathy. It says that any condition of a human being is mirrored by some substance in the universe, and if you bring that substance into the human being, it will bring that information in. That substance carries information that's specific to a certain condition, and you will learn from that substance, your body or yourself, you'll learn from that substance and move past that condition. So it breaks down the division of the universe into self and other, in a way. Another example would be water memory, that says that water is not only a universal medium of a universal solvent of matter, but it's also a solvent of information and energy, and therefore that any two drops of water are unique individuals. They're not these kind of generic substances, but they have individuality. They have uniqueness. Something like crop circles. It again says that there's an intelligence or order that emerges without design. And it's not just in the in these unorthodox theories where you get the communication of the universe that there's intelligence out there. It's also in it's kind of sneaking up inside the scientific intellectual establishment as well. And the most obvious would be quantum mechanics, where here you have, and this was an enormous crisis in the 20s, enormous intellectual crisis. With the single slit experiment, you shoot an electron through a slit, and the electron, each electron is subject to the exact same forces, but this electron goes this way, and that one goes that way, and that one goes somewhere else. And it's the same force exercised on each electron. What does that mean? Why? An indigenous person has no problem answering that. The indigenous person says, well, this one chose to go this way, and that one chose to go that way because they're unique individuals, because the universe is intelligent through and through. Quantum mechanics couldn't accept that, so they said, well, it's just random, it's just acausal. And that is just and it's no big deal, because in the macrocosm, all of this random behavior adds up to our familiar determinacy. Now that doesn't explain the kind of emotional reaction to these theories and phenomena that suggest that we're not alone in an alien universe. They're threatening on a lot of levels. One level is, if there's no purpose out there in the universe, then we are free to impose our design onto nature with impunity. There's nothing that we're interfering with. If the world out there is separate from ourselves, then what we do to the world out there, we're not necessarily doing to ourselves. It doesn't matter. We can forever escape the effects of our actions. And this has been part of our defining mythology that says that human destiny is to become the lords and masters of nature, to impose our design onto the universe. And today we're learning that, in fact, the consequences of what we do are inescapable, and that each of our technological control-based solutions to our problems generates even more consequences, to which we apply even more control, and it generates even more consequences. So we're understanding now, in a very painful way, that what we do to the world, we're doing to ourselves, because we're moving into a new mythology. And the new mythology says, it answers the basic questions in a different way. Who are you? Not a separate individual in a world of other, but the totality of all relationships. And I'm starting to feel like I'm lecturing here a bit. So I'm going to shift gears a little. I mentioned that these various theories are not isolated intellectual constructs. They have an emotional component. Let me give you an example. Because the evidence can, let me tell you another little story. I collect these stories, and I ask people to sometimes to describe an event in their lives that showed them that reality was bigger than they had been told. So I once asked a class at Penn State, and one guy told me the story, and so as I tell the story, I'll tell you what the story was. He said when he was 12 years old, he had a very, very vivid dream in which he was a gold prospector. And he dreamed a whole lifetime in this dream. He went out west, he started a gold prospecting operation, he found gold, he hired people, then there was an earthquake that wiped him out, and it was just this really vivid dream. He woke up in the morning, went to school, and he was in line for lunch. He reaches into his jacket to get his lunch ticket, and he finds this hard object there. He pulls it out, and it's a $20 gold piece. And he had no idea how it got there. And I said, well, I've got an explanation for you. You actually stole that from your dad's coin collection and then confabulated this memory in order to assuage your guilt. And, can you prove that that didn't happen? And he's like, no, I can't. I know it didn't happen, but I can't prove it. But everybody in the room and everybody in this room now, you cannot distinguish what the explanation is based on the evidence that you're given. The evidence that you're given, which is coming from me, equally fits a number of different interpretations. One interpretation is that the object materialized and that our understanding of cause and effect is wrong. Another interpretation is that, yeah, he confabulated it. Another interpretation is that I'm making this story up. We would like to think that we base our beliefs on evidence and that we're all open-minded people, and that if we're presented with evidence that contradicts our beliefs, we'll change our minds because we're scientific, we're open-minded. But that's not actually what happens. Instead, we fit evidence to our beliefs and filter out evidence that doesn't fit into our beliefs. And it's only when our beliefs or our stories reach a crisis point that we become open to different evidence. But you can feel, I'll tell you one more story. A woman, I'll call her Dana. She was at a desperate point in her life, and she had a very hard life. She was lonely, she was suicidal, and she was living near the beach. And just in complete desperation, she goes down to the beach, and she sees all the people there, and she's thinking, please, if there's anything out there, if there's anybody out there, please give me some kind of sign. And she sits down at a part of the beach where no one ever goes because it's next to a concrete wall, and she sits down and she feels something in the sand. She pulls it out. It's a gold medallion, and on it are the words, "I love you." Again, now you can feel a certain energy around that story. And then when I explain it away as, well, that was a kind of a group and she was saying that so that she could feel special. Like, that's an explanation that meets the evidence too. Or, she was mentally distraught. She admits that she was suicidal. She was having delusions, She actually took that medallion with her and then thought that she discovered it. She had a memory lapse, right? I have all kinds of explanations, and those have a different feel to them. So anytime that we're presented with an event or a theory that suggests to us that, yeah, there is an intelligence outside of ourselves. There is purpose and order and intelligence in the universe. And that suggests that the tiny little things that we do have a significance beyond our understanding of force-based cause and effect. Anytime we're presented with something like this, there's a feeling of an awakening knowledge that we're being uplifted into a truth that we've always known. And at the same time, fear comes up as well, and hostility, at least in me. A fear comes up, and it's kind of along the lines of, well, what if it isn't true? What if this is just another delusion? And so sometimes I'll get cynical when I'm presented with, and it doesn't have to be, some kind of material anomaly. It could be, I'll witness an act of incredible generosity or heroism. And there's like the cynical part of me is like, well, is he really being generous? What's in it for him? Or there's kind of like this, it could even be kind of a genetic kind of explanation. Altruism explained as a kind of a mating display that demonstrates that you have the resources to squander on altruistic behavior, and therefore you're a more fit genetic partner or something like that. And so there's this other explanation that feels very cynical. And I think that the reason that I get tempted to retreat into cynicism, and the reason that scientific skeptics are so aggressive and disparaging in their views, in their articulation, is that this knowing of interbeing, this knowing of an intelligent universe, we're all born into that. But it's been betrayed and crushed many, many times. The knowing, for example, that, I'm born to do something magnificent on this earth. Maybe not in a big public way, but something really, really beautiful. Like, I'm here for a reason. I'm here for a purpose. The child's knowing that it's not just a ball of fire there. It's the sun is shining for me and for us, and the bird is singing for me, and this rock has a beingness, has a personality, has everything that I have. Like, this knowing, in so many ways, ideological, educational, it's discounted and it's destroyed, and it's a very painful process that renders us into willing denizens of a flat, gray normality. It's a painful process. And then when something reawakens this knowing, obviously it's quite natural that we're afraid of it. And so we retreat into cynicism. And underneath the most vociferous skeptic, I hear kind of this cry of, please convince me, please prove it to me. And any chink in the proof, any flaw, any possible flaw in the proof is almost an insult. Unfortunately, we can never get perfect proof. And the skeptical belief, or any belief, is attracted to a state of being. We don't actually make our beliefs, as I said, based on evidence and logic. We make our beliefs, we come to our beliefs from somewhere that's much deeper and unconscious. So maybe the question then to ask, when you have a choice of what to believe about something, what to believe about another person, what to believe about yourself, what to believe about a scientific theory, maybe the question to ask is, which belief is aligned with who I really am and who I am ready to become? And I'm not saying to disregard evidence. When contradictory evidence begins to gather, that's a sign that the belief or the story that one is living in is getting old. And that's what's happening on a mass level today. The story that humanity has lived in, separate selves in a universe of force, is falling apart. All of the systems built on it are falling apart. The medical system, the educational system, the political system, the economic system. Our relationship to nature, our economy, our industrial system, all of these are falling apart because they're all based on, in one way or another, they all manifest or realize the story of separation. For example, money. Our money system today, because, I'm not going to go too much into this, but essentially because it's based on interest-bearing debt, puts us into competition with each other, whether we want to be or not, creates artificial scarcity, anxiety, and the necessity of endless growth. Living in an economy that we do, our daily economic experience reflects back to us the principle of separation, you know? It makes it sure seem true that, yeah, everybody's in it for themselves and everybody's kind of my competitor, and because it's a commodity economy, it makes it look like we're surrounded, it alienates us from the uniqueness of all things. Every chair in this room is identical. You know, here we are. I mean, we have a conference on non-duality. 10:27, does that mean I have 3 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay. And we're indoors, you know? I mean, that's a kind of a separation. Throughout the whole conference, we have the speaker up here and the listeners down there, which is another kind of duality. So with that in mind, okay, let me finish the story that I started with about the woman Buddha and why I admire her so much. So someone like, I don't know, Vandana Shiva or Gandhi, living according to the new story, not just having an opinion about non-duality, but living non-duality, they have a lot of feedback from the world that says, yeah, you're right, you're doing something important. I have a lot of feedback from the world that says that. When I go speak places, you know, and people say, yeah, you know, thank you for saying what I've always known, you know, and I get, from my writing and from my speaking, I get like a lot of very enthusiastic responses that validate what I do and help me to believe that, yeah, I am not a separate self. People like Buddha and people doing all of this invisible work behind the scenes, they don't have that affirmation. They have to stand much more strongly in a story of interbeing. Someone asked me not too long ago, you know, Charles, if it's true that this is a special time in the Earth's evolution where all beings are coming together for this transcendence, for this transition into the adulthood of the species, then where are all the great avatars, you know? Where are all the great miracle workers? What happened to them? And I think that what's happened to them is they've kind of retreated into the background. They're doing the invisible things. I've met some of them, kindergarten teachers and a motorcycle mechanic who is just like this fountain of love, you know, because that is where you have to really have faith and really embody non-duality. But not to be a spiritual teacher or a speaker or to do a big thing. That doesn't require very much faith. Our received worldview says, yeah, the big things are worthwhile, you know, staying at home with the kids, that's not going to change anything. But writing a book about staying home with the kids, that'll change things. You know, you have to do a big thing because we believe that the world works by force. And the more you can magnify your force, the bigger an effect you'll have. But there's another matrix of cause and effect that we all know and feel that in which those invisible small things have just as big an effect as the big things. Everybody knows when you're having that moment with a baby or with an old person that your choices in that moment are just as significant on a cosmic scale as any choice that Barack Obama makes. This is something that we absolutely know. But our reality doesn't reflect that back at us. Our ideological surroundings don't reflect that back at us. So the really great spirits are the ones who go into places where they don't have that aid from each other. The reason we're here, I think, at this conference is to remind each other, to help each other stand in this new story, the story of interbeing, the story of non-duality, the story that every small choice that you make has cosmic significance. We get together and we're like, yeah, you're not crazy, are you? I'm not crazy. I'm doing this too. I believe this too. We help each other stand there. So my time is up, but I'd like to, instead of having questions and answers, which doesn't make it really much more participatory, because it's just like the one or two most assertive people who are going to say anything, I'd like to offer you a question and answer just with your neighbor. And I'll propose, and this will just be 5 minutes, and I will bow out. and you can continue it in the break if you want. But it's to describe to your partner, to the person next to you, the person who inspires you with their strong stand in the world of interbeing. Someone whose generosity inspires your generosity. Someone whose compassion inspires your compassion. Someone whose life makes you know that you're not crazy for living according to the logic of the heart that contradicts our old logic of the separate mind, but that will no longer contradict our logic as we step into the story of interbeing. So take first 30 seconds before you start talking to bring that person to your mind. It could be someone you know well, or it could be someone you just met once. And we'll give it just maybe even 2 or 3 minutes because I don't want to transgress on the break time. So one person can tell their story, the one who really feels the upwelling of that story. And then during the break, you can tell the second one. And so I'll gather you in 2 or 3 minutes, I'll raise my hand. When you see my hand raised, be quiet and raise your hand. Okay? 2 or 3 minutes, go. Hi.
So I just had a thought when you were speaking about, the big important job of writing and being recognized by many, and the unimportant motorcycle mechanic's job, and Buddha not getting recognized by her daughter.
Yeah.
And I just, my thought is, how do you know she wasn't recognized? How do you know that she wasn't getting tremendous benefit of just giving to her daughter?
Well, she was, yeah.
Those years, and
she was, yeah.
just because it wasn't recognized in the way, the daughter responding,
Right.
it could have been huge. Well, obviously it was, or she wouldn't be doing it. And, the mother who does her job versus the writer who does his job. As a mother myself, it's the biggest, most important job I've ever had, and I've had the other job where, I've been recognized by my peers, and there's just nothing less about the mechanic to me. You know
Right.
what I mean? There's
Yeah.
beauty and grace.
That's kind of what I'm trying to say, though.
Because it sounded like
Did it come out the opposite?
my job is so important. And
Wow, okay.
that's how I saw it, because
All right, I'll have to clarify that.
it's just
Because
my
I meant the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe we were just pointing to the fact that they're both important.
Right.
And I heard it as,
Okay, let me clarify that then.
and that could just be me.
No, because I was trying to make the point I was trying to make the exact point that you're making.
Yeah.
But you heard it as the opposite, so I'm going to clarify that.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So someone just came up to me and said that what she heard was me saying that being a speaker and a writer is more important than being a mother or a mechanic or something like that. And I just want to make sure that that's not the message that got out there. Okay. All right. It's kind of the opposite. So, anyway, I'll be around. My website is charleseisenstein.net.